Hey everyone, Brian here from Native Instruments. I'm super excited to be here today to be giving you an overview of one of Native Instruments' most recent releases, Komplete 13. This release just has so many new products. There's Guitar Rig 6 Pro, Cremona Quartet, Straylight, Farlight, Mysteria, Butch Vig drums. The list just goes on and on and on. So to demo this, to demo these products, basically I'm going to be working off of this kind of 2-minute trailer score piece that I did, and I utilized a lot of the new instruments from Komplete 13. So we'll basically be using that project as a starting point, and then I'll start dissecting the individual elements, show you the new instruments, kind of how I got these sounds, and just overall general functionality. So without further ado, let's kick things off and listen to the project. So now that you've heard the project, let's start dissecting some of the individual elements that are in this project. So the very first thing that you heard was an instance of Farlight. So let's solo that just so you can hear it by itself. So Farlight, I would say, is one of kind of Native Instruments' first vocal instruments. We've also released Mysteria, which is great for kind of abstract sounds, but Farlight is kind of a more playable instrument. So what we're really looking at here is the main GUI for Farlight. On the left, you have a grain module, and on the right, you have the sample module. So the grain module is basically, it's a granular synth. And then on the right, you have just a basic sampler, which basically lets you layer multiple sounds together to create some, really interesting and wide presets. So basically here in the center, you have this XY pad, which lets you morph between two different parameters that are preset, depending on what preset you're loading, but you can always change these as well. So right now with this setting, as I move it to the left and to the right, it's basically changing the start position of this granular synth. And then as I increase it, it's increasing the amount of resonance. So let's just listen to that. So the XY pad in the center allows you to really just morph between a handful of different presets. So again, I can change this if I want. Let's say I want to change the resonance. I can click there and say let's change it to the amount of reverb that gets applied. So this is again the very kind of basic perform section. But if I want to dive further, I can click on the grain, which then lets me start adjusting the parameters for this grain engine. So I have basic controls of choosing the start and the end point of this loop that I have, or the sample. I can choose the amount of grains, or really the amount of snapshots that this engine is taking to generate the sound, and also adjusting how this play marker moves throughout the sample over time. But also just other functions like tune, amplitude, and an envelope for changing parameters over time. Now, one of my favorite things though with this is this randomize function. I can either randomize just the parameters or the sound source as well. So let's say I change this as I play it. Now I can randomize everything. So yeah, you can hear it's basically just, changing up the source sample and all those parameters. So it's a great way to, get creative, come up with some unique ideas, and really just also use it as a starting point to design the sound. You can also, again, adjust the sample engine as well. So if you want to adjust like the filter modulation, all of that can be done in the sample area. You can also adjust effects, so you can create chains of effects per source sample. If I don't want this delay, I could choose this to a gator and then start manipulating the parameters here. But then you also have an area for kind of global effects. So if you want to apply a 3-band EQ, or if you want to apply reverb to the whole entire patch, you can do that directly from here. So that's a quick overview of Farlight. Now let's take a listen to another element that I have here. It's kind of the second piece that you hear. It's Mysteria. So let's solo this. So Mysteria is another vocal instrument, as I mentioned before, but this is also a great one for horror films, just trying to create really abstract sounds. So basically, what we're looking at here in the GUI is pretty much similar to Farlight. You have two sound sources, and then this XY pad in the center, which basically lets you morph between the left source sample or the right. And then increasing it on the y-axis increases the intensity. So let's just listen to this. So it's very easy to manipulate, and in this project, I was basically automating this XY axis in the center. So all of these, there's tons and tons of source samples to choose from. I think it was like 450 hours of choir recordings in Bratislava and Cologne. But on the main perform page, very easy to start manipulating it here. But as with any instrument, you can really start diving deeper into editing this patch. So clicking here really lets you start adjusting the parameters for the source samples themselves, such as volume, panning. You can change the different mic positions as well. So a lot of customization here. You also have the effects section per source sample. So if you want to add drive or some interesting mutate effects, you can do that per sample. But basically Mysteria is kind of broken up into two different types of instruments. There's the atmosphere instruments and the cluster type. So this patch that I have, that one's considered atmosphere, where no matter what key I play on the keyboard, it's it's basically generating the same tone. But a cluster instrument still has that abstract sound, but it actually has kind of it's more playable. It has tones. So if I click on, let's say, this close and dense one, as I play it on the keyboard, you'll notice that you actually start hearing actual pitches. So if you're looking for a type of sound that's just ominous and mysterious, but actually has some tones, you would be looking more towards a cluster type instrument. But yeah, when you're in the cluster designer, you can start choosing different cluster instruments. You can load these up. There we go. And now from here, you can also choose, increasing different types of voices. So you can basically create up to, 8 different voices per source sample, and then kind of adjusting different settings for pan, tuning, kind of the intensity as well. So you can really dive deep, create some very unique sounds out of this. So definitely a huge fan of Mysteria. So the next instrument I want to touch upon is Straylight. So this is also very similar to Farlight, but instead of using vocal samples, it's basically using kind of instruments, synths, some vocal samples as well. But yeah, let's just listen to this instance. So what we're looking at here, this is the GUI for Straylight. So very similar to Farlight, where you have the grain module and then the sample module as well. So let's just play this quickly so you can hear it again. So if you want to start designing your own sound with Straylight or with Farlight, what you can do is below the grain or the sample, you can click the text here, and then you start having all these different source samples that you can choose from. You can filter and looking for, a decaying squeak. I can favorite these and I can load them up. So there's a lot of source samples to choose from, but one of the great things with Straylight and with Farlight is that you can actually use your own samples in either one of these modules. So let's say I go to my one-shots tab. I can load anything from the expansions. I can load anything from sounds.com pack, or even just samples that I have on my computer. I can easily just drag and drop them into either one of these engines. So for, let's say, the one-shot, I can choose something completely random. Let's see, let's go to Synth Miscellaneous. All right, that works. And let's just do one more here in the grain module. Literally just choose anything. There we go. So now let's see what this sounds like. So again, you're not limited to just the source samples that come with the instrument, but literally any audio sample that you have, you can drag and drop it and create something new. And kind of one of the tricks that I also like to do is finding an interesting preset from Straylight or Farlight and basically just swap out the source samples. So if you like the particular settings on a patch that you found, but you just want to swap out the source samples, you can get some really, really interesting and unique sounds out of that, as opposed to just starting from scratch and then turning all of the knobs. So yeah, Straylight, definitely another favorite of mine. So the next product I want to talk about is Guitar Rig 6. So I have this instance of Massive loaded, and I was basically running this through Guitar Rig. So let's just solo this very quickly. So Guitar Rig 6 Pro, it's been a long needed update. And basically what we're looking at right now is kind of the initial GUI. I have a few effects running on here, but kind of the first things that you'll notice is the GUI has been updated. So it has this more modern, very sleek look. And also the whole browsing system and finding the different components is definitely a lot easier. So if I'm on my presets, these are preset racks that have been created. You can start doing some additional filtering. So in this case, I was looking for a particular type of effect. So I could choose reverbs and delays, and then I have a preset list that contains a lot of these that matches basically those filter tags. But you can also filter by different things such as styles. If you're looking for amps or effects that are more meant for classic rock or funk and soul, you can click on those and your filter, the presets list will be smaller, helping you find the type of amp or effect that you're looking for much quicker. But you also have this whole color coding system. So if you like, let's say this preset here, you can right click and say, I want this to be cyan. And you can come up with any sort of color coding system that you want, but at least it allows you to really help find a type of component or a preset much faster. So yeah, on here, there's a ton of new components that have been added. Everything from Guitar Rig 5 is also included. But kind of one of the main things that's been added to this is this new thing called intelligent circuit modeling. Basically, this is kind of this whole cutting edge process, machine learning, that really just makes recreating classic amps and effects just so much more realistic. So it's definitely some groundbreaking technology. So some of them that are on here, for example, there's Bass Invader, there's Chicago, Fire Breather, and Matched Cabinet. So let's just start with something new very quickly. Save this. So if I want to start building my own rack, I can just basically go to the components section and start dragging and dropping things into this area in the center. So maybe with this massive patch, I'm looking for something with some distortion. So I can choose cat, for example, and let's listen. So yeah, you can definitely hear some distortion. Some of the components that you'll notice as well are actually from some very popular effects that we've released, such as the bite, there's dirt, but also my personal favorite, there is ROM. So this is also a product that's included in Komplete 13, but basically we've kind of recoded it so that it's, also can run inside of Guitar Rig 6. So from here, I can start tweaking the effects. And then I can just keep layering more and more things on here. So if I want to add, let's add flare. Oops, there we go. So it's basically adding a phaser to this. So yeah, it's very easy to start creating your own. But one of the things that's kind of new is you also have this macro control down at the bottom. Right now we're basically looking at 8 macros, but if I wanted to, I could also have up to 16. So it's very easy to kind of create your own macros. You just simply click this little icon here, drag it to the parameter that you want, and now as I start tweaking the knob, you'll notice that it's moving. I can also drag this to, let's say, pitch. As I move it, both of them are moving together simultaneously. So this really allows you to quickly access different parameters across all these different components that you have. If you want to adjust the decay, the flare amount, and pitch, you can basically map these macro knobs to control all 3 simultaneously. As you can imagine, if you have a very large rack, it'd be very difficult to start controlling things where you have to scroll. So the whole macro system just makes it a lot easier to use. But yeah, definitely very excited about Guitar Rig. A lot of people use it for guitars, for basses, but there's also a lot of people that use it to process different types of sounds like synths. So in this case, I'm using Massive X. I'm running it through a distortion component, through a reverb and a flanger component. So yeah, very versatile instrument. Again, it's been an update that's we've needed for a long time, so very excited that Guitar Rig 6 is included in Komplete 13. So definitely check that one out. So the next instrument that I used was an instrument or a synth called Super 8. So let's solo this so you can hear what it sounds like. So Super 8, this is an amazing synth. It's reactor based, and it's really great for getting that kind of 80s retro synth feel to it. So I think for me, what makes this synth, I would say, fun to use and easy to use is that there's basically no submenus. There's not a lot of things that you need to dive into to really explore the full functionality of this. So what we're looking at here, you have 2 oscillators which are generating the sound. Then that's being routed into the filter, and then the amplitude envelope at the end. And then all these things down at the bottom are just ways that you can modulate different settings. So if you want to modulate the filter envelope and have the filter change over time, you can do that here. Same thing with the amplitude envelope. So if you're looking for something that has a sharper attack, you decrease this. If I increase the attack amount, it kind of swells in. And then down at the bottom, you have different types of effects. So you can add like chorus, flanger, delay, reverb. If you're looking for a synth to kind of really understand synthesis, this is a great one to start with, because again, there's not tons of menus that you need to dive into. If you're learning the basics of synthesis, really just finding where are the oscillators, where's the filter and the amplitude envelope, finding those kind of main elements, you would find them in any plugin. So as long as you can kind of understand those concepts, learning synthesis is definitely a lot easier. But in the case of Super 8, if I wanted to have more low end in this patch, I can increase the sine wave, which would then just give me this kind of low tone, kind of basically filling up the low end of this patch. But yeah, again, it's a very simple very simple synth to use. It's very easy just to start tweaking knobs, increasing these sliders, messing with the filter envelope, and just getting some unique sounds out of it. Now for, let's say my favorite part of this piece is kind of this orchestral finale. So let's just take a quick listen to that. Cool. So basically what I was using for that kind of high string sound was I was using the Stradivari violin. So part of Komplete 13 is this series called Cremona Quartet. So this is, Cremona, Italy, is kind of, I would say, the birthplace of violins or these types of string instruments. So the Cremona Quartet comes with basically 4 different types of string instruments. So there's the Stradivari violin, which you just heard. There's also the Stradivari cello, the Amati viola, and then the Guarneri violin. I don't speak Italian, so I'm probably butchering these names. But this is such a unique instrument. This is, I'd say, kind of our first solo string library made in partnership with E-Instruments. But the whole story behind this is extremely interesting, where there's a violin museum in Cremona, Italy, and in order to get the most pristine sound, pristine recordings, they actually blocked off a lot of the streets around this museum just so that there was no outdoor, traffic noise. So what you're hearing is, I would say, probably one of the most pure solo violin sounds that I've ever had from a plugin. So with the Stradivari violin, in this case, you have different articulation settings with staccato, so easy to kind of swap these out if I want to, let's say, use this slot to have a different articulation setting. I can click the 3 dots and choose something like a trill. So you can also hear you're getting all these nice slides, from the violin. So yeah, from here, you have a couple basic kind of settings. You have the dynamics, which is kind of let's say, the velocity of it, which can be controlled from the mod wheel. And you can also increase the amount of vibrato. But yeah, there's basically 2 kind of right now different types of instances of the Stradivari violin. You also have mixer settings here. So if you want to increase the microphone position, increase the amount of closer mics or far away, and a general room noise, you can increase that and adjust it from hitting this little mixer icon here. But yeah, I would say for a solo string instrument, the Stradivari violin is definitely up there with one of my top favorite solo string libraries to use. But yeah, so again, it's, a very basic functionality. The violins can only sound so many ways, but it's quite impressive to really hear the quality of this instrument, and also just to know the amount of effort that went into sampling this instrument. So there are a few other instruments that I just want to briefly touch upon. These are ones that I didn't end up using in this project, but are new to Komplete 13 that I wanted to cover. So there's basically a few new instruments that are part of this Contact Play series. So for those of you who aren't familiar, the Contact Play series is kind of a series of different instruments. It really started with Analog Dreams, Ethereal Earth, and Hybrid Keys, where you have kind of 2 different sound sources. Super easy to blend between them, but there's no like crazy menus to dive through. Have general macro controls. So with Komplete 13, there's a few new ones that we've added to this bundle. And the first one is Butch Vig drums. So yeah, Butch Vig is a very famous drummer, and we basically turned a lot of his drum samples and actually him playing into a virtual instrument that you can easily control. So right now I have it loaded up. Let's listen to some of these instances. So if you're looking for a, let's say a drum instrument, like real drum sounds, this Budwig Play series is a great one to use. So from here, what you're looking at is kind of the 16 sound sources. All of these I can trigger directly on my keyboard if I wanted to. I can't finger drum, so that's the best I can do. So for those of you who can't play these things live, very intricate patterns, there's a whole pattern section here. So on my keyboard, I can trigger the different pre-made patterns that, that Butch has recorded himself. So my project is 80 BPM, so I can just increase this, do double time. So very easy to switch between them. Now, if I want to, let's say, edit one of these patterns, I can actually just click this little icon here, drag it directly to my timeline on the Budwig drums. And now I have this MIDI pattern. And from here, I can start editing the actual MIDI notes. So if I don't want, this, let's say the open hi-hats, I can click them, delete them. And now when I play it back, so yeah, very easy to take the patterns from this plugin, drag it to your DAW, and then start manipulating it that way. But there's also other things that you can control, like macros. You can add different types of effects, like insert, global, send effects. But yeah, these macros are pretty advanced. You can basically control up to 24 different parameters simultaneously. So if I wanted to, let's say, control the dampening, the stereo, and the modulation, I can click this little dot with my macro controls, select it, do the same for here, one more. And you can also adjust kind of the range that the knob is allowed to move based on these kind of triangles, these markers that you set here. So as I start increasing it, you can see that the knobs are moving. I can also switch positions, so they move in opposite directions as well. So yeah, a lot of possibilities with these macros. And then if you want to dive further, you can go to the kits. You can swap out different source samples. So if maybe I want that to be a hi-hat, and then you can easily swap them out to basically create your own kits. So a couple other play series that I do want to touch upon. So another one that I have here is Cloud Supply. So this is a great one for kind of, let's say, pop, trap lead sounds. You could always pitch down the lead sounds and get some low basses out of it. But yeah, definitely a fun one to use. So if I go to the main performance page, the Cloud Supply part of the play series is made up of 2 source samples that you can just click here, swap them out, choose anything you want. Then you also have the same kind of macro controls that you saw with Budwig drums, which allow you to easily manipulate kind of the main parameters of the synth that you would want. And then you also have the balance knob, which lets you blend between the 2 source samples. So if I start playing something, turn off the sequencer, and all of these things you can modulate. And you can also click on this randomize function here, which is going to swap out both source samples and the parameters as well. But yeah, so if you want to dive a little bit further, you can choose the sequencer here. So if you want to basically have a sequence that's changing the pitch, the velocity, also settings for the macros, you can engage it here. Click on sequence and then start manipulating the settings for macros 1 through 6 and the pitch and velocity. Best melodic line you've ever heard. So that's Cloud Supply. And then the last one that's also part of Komplete 13 is Modular Icons. So this was made in partnership with the Bob Moe Foundation. And basically with Modular Icons, we basically sampled tons of modular synths, turned those samples, and this basically created this instrument very similar to Cloud Supply. It's really just the source samples that are different. So you also have this balance knob that lets you blend between sound A and sound B. You also have the sequencer here, so you can also modulate macros and the pitch and velocity simultaneously. So I'm a huge fan of the Play series. Again, they're very easy to use. The sonic quality of them is amazing. But yeah, these are some of my go-to Play series instruments. So again, this was just a taste of some of the new instruments that are included in Complete 13. Again, we had, Cremona Quartet, Farlight, Straylight, Mysteria, I think Guitar Rig 6 Pro. Again, there's just so many to go through. So I definitely encourage everyone, go to nativeinstruments.com, go to the Complete 13 product page and just look at all the new things that are included. Here are some sound examples, but hopefully this gives you a good taste of some of the new things that are in there and general functionality. So yeah, thank you so much for watching.